MCU. What's up? Welcome back to John Dudley Speaks, the podcast. We are going to dive into the first of 3 Marvel movies releasing this year. Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, not those Sony ones that are terrible. Likely the worst of the 3 from Marvel Studios this year because, I don't know, Thunderbolts and the Fantastic Four look pretty good. But yeah, we are going to talk about the return of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in theaters, Captain America, Brave New World, highly anticipated movie. But first, we're going to cover some major news, probably the most major news that's happened recently. The Birds, they won the Super Bowl. So, yeah, go Birds, go Philly. It's a Philly thing. Cooper DeJean is my hero. Build a statue of him, build a statue of him, Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, all of them. Best Eagles team that has ever existed, and they're only going to get better. So, mark my words, next year they're going to be there again. So, we'll see. I know the Chiefs are probably going to have themselves a bit of a spiral. So, that's not my problem. That's Andy Reid's problem. And it's going to be a big problem coming up soon. So, to be honest, if you were an Eagles fan or wanted the Chiefs to lose or tired of seeing Taylor Swift, which I think is a dumb argument. They show her like 20 seconds every game. If you're in that camp, Super Bowl 59 was pretty fun. And Kendrick Lamar's halftime show was super exciting, visceral. I know not everybody loved it, but, I was in awe. I think, he had a good amount of hits in the from Damn to GNX that he played, and I know some people were complaining about there not being enough to Pimp a Butterfly or Good Kid, Mad City, but I didn't mind. I like that he didn't need to rely on the pre-Damn era stuff. I mean, it was such a visually excellent experience. I loved seeing how creative he got with the production design, and just him being able to tell a story while also just having fun, being zippy and hilarious, and all at Drake's expense. And speaking of Drake, on the flip side, a new Drake album dropped in the wake of the Super Bowl, and it is horrible. It is his worst album. It's really not even worth talking about. It's so bad, so cringeworthy, and the man's almost 40 and talking about just literally every form of just sexual attraction and dating, and it's just come on, grow up. Well, at some point, you're gonna have to stop playing into Kendrick's hands. Make it way too easy for him to just call you out for being a colonizer of the culture. I mean, Drake sings in a Spanish accent. It's literally one of the worst things I've heard in the last few years in music. Yeah, so Kendrick wins again, Drake loses again, and we all win because the Birds win. Next, we got a new look at Bridgerton Season 4, so that's going to be interesting. Certainly more interesting than the latest with Penelope and Colin, because we got Benedict and Sophie. They're the diamonds of the season, so been looking forward to that. I think it'll be a nice pivot in terms of plot, in terms of vibe. I think Benedict is a very charismatic lead character, and I think it'll show a different side of the masculinity aspect that Bridgerton often plays into. I think we got different versions of the same thing from Anthony Bridgerton and from Simon the first season, and then Colin. I found Colin to be a little off-putting as the main lead, but we'll see where that goes. I think it's going to be a nice bounce back. I think season 3 had a lot of build-up, and then this one, hopefully, if it comes out, I know they were targeting 2026, but I hope it comes out later this year. It just shows are taking way too long to come back. But last but not least, speaking of something that took way too long to come back, we got a trailer for The Accountant 2. First of these in 9 years, I think. 2016 was the first one. I just rewatched the first one with my family, and my wife saw it for the first time, and it's great. It holds up. It's such a sleek hitman spy thriller that it reminds me a lot of those 90s Clooney Affleck type thrillers that kind of jump off the page, kind of like a Robert Ludlum type novel in film form. But yeah, I'm excited that we're getting this again. We're getting Bernthal and Affleck doing some kind of buddy cop team up as brothers. So, been a long time. I'm interested to see what Ben Affleck's done with the character and if he can evolve it and push it a little bit. The writers from Ozark did the first one, so they've been busy since then. But having them come back to this, having it all be under the same roof again, I think will make it feel congruous and feel like a natural evolution of these characters. And my mom had actually mentioned when watching the trailer, she had said like it kind of feels like a western, and I really agree with that because like they kind of have this like barn burning type of action sequence where the two of them are dual wielding, and it looks really fun. It looks like Bernthal and Affleck are gonna get to just like ham it up as brothers, and that's something, if anything, I could criticize the first one for is that they didn't share many scenes together, and now they get to share a whole movie. So very exciting, very cool. Like getting to play around with that chemistry. But speaking of chemistry, without further ado, let's talk about Brave New World. Let's talk about this movie that has Anthony Mackie and Harrison Ford going at it against each other. My review released yesterday, and if you haven't read it, overall, I like this film. I think it suffers from the breadth of reshoots and focus group dialogue that is really distracting. But at the core of all the ideas, it's something stirring and thought provoking. It's visceral. It's defiant. But it has its big struggles and hurdles. Obviously, I'm going to get into some spoilers ahead, but in this format, I just want to dive deeper into some of the major highlights, some of the major lowlights, just generally discuss where Marvel will take this foundation in the years to come as well. So, starting with the look of the movie, the action is something that I think people will be mixed on, but personally, I think it's just one of those where it progressively got better as it went along. The first 20 minutes are really, really rough in terms of action and editing and pacing. The directionality and the positioning and the geography of the first fight scene where Sam Wilson shows up to stop the Serpent Society, it's not great. It's very like hacky, and you find yourself having trouble following the moves and the choreography. And if it's intentional, that's I think a bad stylistic choice, and if it's unintentional, then it's a bad editing choice. So like, I think they should have. This is clearly a reshoot. This opening moment that they tagged on to the beginning of the movie. It's just frustrating to watch. But after that, we get far better scenes in terms of action. I think the White House scene where Isaiah is brainwashed and shoots at Harrison Ford, fantastic. I loved the chase scene. The close quarters were better. I think Julius Ona did a better job with that kind of stuff. And then I think, as they kind of, expanded it out in terms of ambition, that aircraft carrier fight on Celestial Island was, I think, a huge high point for this film. You have a lot of creativity in showing off Sam's versatility as Cap. When you had Cap being portrayed as Evans, or Evans being portraying Cap back then, I think he was able to show like sheer strength because of that, super soldier serum. But the way that he would do it would be like these giant punches, and he would, they visualized it so well in the fight choreography. And Winter Soldier, especially, the hand-to-hand was great. And the hand-to-hand here is impressive, but like they don't overemphasize it as much. Because I think that's where the editing woes really take off in this movie. But watching, what's his name, Danny Ramirez as the new Falcon, Having him coasting along on a missile and surfing on it was really cool. I really loved seeing Sam use the shield in inventive ways while flying in the air. The way that he would like kick the shield and also like spin up in the air and use the vibranium wings to hit guys was really cool. Like basically them getting into that dogfight by the with the with like the brainwashed pilots was like super cool, and you felt the stakes on it as it was like intercutting with Harrison Ford like succumbing to the Red Hulk, kind of that like burning in him, like like hoping to get out. Yeah, I mean, as that segued into like the final third act fight, I think the Red Hulk versus Cap fight, minus some visual aspects that look a little bad that I'll get into. I think it looks great. I think the CGI on Harrison Ford's Red Hulk is absolutely terrific. It's so detailed. It's so lifelike in how it like builds out his face. It doesn't look like they AI'd anything or just like sloppily put things together. It looked like it took a lot of time, and like a lot of the budget of this film went into that. And the way that we get to creatively see how Red Hulk is a lot more fierce and angry, obviously, and just overall like overpowered versus Sam. Like you feel the stakes as they fight. It's shot in a way that you feel every punch that Sam takes. It's not necessarily the best thing in the world, but it is really fun, and that brings me to my thoughts on the CGI. There are definitely spots in this movie where the CGI is really questionable. And again, I think it's a budget concern. They spent so much on the Red Hulk aspect of this movie, and they really wanted to get butts and seats, clearly, because they lost a lot of movie on the front end of this movie because of having to reshoot over and over. And it's got to be a lot when you're having to ask Giancarlo Esposito to come in for a run of reshoots because your movie got focus group panned. So that's going to cost a lot of money. So that money has to come out somewhere, and it really just shows in the rushed CGI of some of the action scenes in the early part of the film. And I think the CGI that's applied to some of the bigger, more like expansive, ambitious, establishing shots just looks off. The green screening looks pretty like tedious at times. There's a shot in there at the end, the cherry blossoms, that like it looks fake. And I mean, if they actually shot there, great. But shot composition matters, and I feel like this is a movie that doesn't necessarily have the bandwidth or the budget to take that seriously. So it's kind of like you get what you get. In that sense, I think the visual language of this movie can sometimes come across as campy. I mean, there's times where you're looking at Harrison Ford having to kind of like sit in this like kind of opulent setting, when he's like in Japan, I think is the one of the scenes where I just feel like it looked, I don't know, it looked a little too clean. It looked a little like, okay, this was done in another reshoot as well. The raft scenes looked fine. It's just some of these scenes like really call for camp, and they don't have it. But then the scenes that don't necessarily call for it, like the what is it? I think the stuff that happens in the like, was it Echo Base, Camp Echo? Yeah, Camp Echo. Like that looks just really cheesy. My wife turned to me during the movie and she's like, "That was really cheesy." I'm like, "Yeah, it just kind of the way it moves along, and the way that like it's visualized, kind of it wants to be a little cool and slick, but then it also wants to have a little fun too. So it has that that vibe where it can't quite decide if it wants to be a little creepy or if it wants to be campy. That being said, the campiness is, yeah, I don't know, it's a little dull, and the creepiness is just not hitting home because it doesn't quite have the tonal, you know, capacity to pull it off. And that's where I want to get into the feel of this movie. It tries to be creepy, it tries to be paranoid, it tries to show that 3 Days of the Condor type political thriller, all the President's Men thing that the Winter Soldier did and Civil War did. And for the most part, it gets that down in, you know, from a visual sense, but from a tonal sense, it's really it's very much a mixed bag. If it's hard to describe because there are times where they nail down the shot composition to make it feel like this world that Sam's living in is very much like a, you know, a chaotic one that is built around this fear of, you know, metahumans and this fear of what else is out there post Endgame. Now that we got, you know, 5 years of people being gone back, it's I mean, it's something that's tough to pull off, and they do a good job at, like, you know, the White House scenes, and you know, they do a good job like during the aircraft scene, like that that whole sequence really like nails down the tone. But then I think where they falter is actually like in the third act, where they get a little bit too like cheesy, and they lose that grounded connection. So then, in essence, you know, you don't get you don't get to like actually feel like this can you know, particularly exist in the real world when they're clearly trying to draw ties to our real world. It's odd. It's hard to explain. You know, in my review, I poked at how they're trying to like kind of build this idea of, well, politically in this moment, you know, things are worse than ever, blah blah blah, but they don't actually like get into why. And I kept on saying to my wife, I'm like, all of this storytelling is which is why type storytelling. Like, you know, this happens and this happens, which is why this ended up happening. And I as a viewer, I found it a little off-putting that I kept on being told what I should feel in each moment. And that to me tells me that, you know, there was definitely Disney having a hand in the creative discourse around politics and about global diplomacy. And given, you know, what's going on across the world right now with multiple international wars that are happening, and, you know, with the questionable up in the air type, you know, just predictions about what will happen, given that we've just had, you know, a new administration, and, you know, given how polarizing of a figure Donald Trump is, it kind of leads to this idea of like, we gotta play it safe. But then I'm totally fine with that, playing it safe, playing it straight on politically driven movies. That is like something that's been done for like 30 years when it comes to this stuff. But that means the tone has to match. So like, you can't go just full throttle into steely, icy, you know, just I feel like hectic, chaotic political atmosphere that's driven by like geopolitical stuff. That, and if you're not going to get into it, then like, I don't think you can attack it from that angle. I don't think you can do a both sides type of political discourse movie if you're gonna like try and hit it with like realism, like especially hyper realism. And I think there's times where this movie just dives straight into hyper realism after doing something very comic booky, and it's jarring because then the message and the motto of it at the end of the day is, oh, we all take responsibility for our actions, we're Americans, like, you know, it's not it's never enough for these people that I'm a black man as Captain America, but I'm not going to get into why. I'm not going to explain that. I'm not going to have it be shown in how Sam is treated. I think they walked back a lot of stuff from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I think that was a mistake because there's moments where they show that, where they do that whole thing where Sebastian Stan and Anthony Mackie are in the streets of Baltimore, and a cop says, "Hey, this man bothering you?" And I really liked how they would show how, as a black man, he was treated completely differently, and dealt with all this racial bias and this inherent institutional racism, and then stacking the shield on top of that and the legacy of that. It is truly complicated, and I don't think Disney even tried to consistently carry over those themes outside of like a few quotes here and there and a few references to it, like from Carl Lumbly as Isaiah Bradley. And I think sanitizing that while also keeping the grounded tone is just, it's at odds. It becomes a mismatch. And then clearly, because the president of the United States in our current day and age right now is a convicted felon. Uh, it's odd that we have a convicted felon at the end of this film, but they make the point to say like Eddie takes full accountability for his actions and decides to give up the presidency. I was just like, okay, come on, you guys know what you're doing. You know what you're saying. At this point, it just makes us think too much about the real world that's out there, and it makes me think that this whole Brave New World that they cooked up has no interest in actually adhering to what ideas that are being like injected into the foundation of it. So it just, I don't know, it's wonky, it wobbles. It's just not from a script writing sense. It's so focus group to death, and from just from a like aesthetic point of view, it has like so many lopsided like aspects to it. But then from a messaging point of view, it's truly just like mixed in really what it wants to say. So it doesn't say anything. It just tells you everything's fine. It feels like the whole movie is that meme of that like dude that's in, that's sitting in the fire. It's like, it's fine. America's okay. We're gonna get out of this. I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know if that's where we're at right now. But speaking of like, where, like, when it comes to, it's like the place that this movie's soul is at, its heart is at, like, it's not communicated well through the direction or the script, but Anthony Mackie and Harrison Ford are absolutely terrific in this movie. They're the lifeblood that keeps the movie going. I mean, if you don't have Anthony Mackie in this central role, I don't think there are many other actors that can approach this from such a simple point of view, because they put a lot on his shoulders in terms of being this new Captain America, given the state of global affairs and where we're at, and given just the very heightened racist climate that is happening right now in the U.S. Actually, just all over right now. It's just become a lot more just acceptable to just be like, "Hey, Hitler was kind of right," and it's like, no, he wasn't. He like murdered many, many people, and it's very odd that we're like in this time period where it's literally just like frowned upon to even have like a black lead by like masses of people that want to get up on YouTube and be like, oh, Captain America's woke now. And I'm like, okay, well, where was this when the comics were, quote, woke in the 90s, Like, does being black just constitute some kind of political statement now? And it doesn't. Like, I think there's this refusal to coexist with these ideas that, like, hey, this was source material years ago, that Sam Wilson was a lot more open about like his status as a black man and like being Captain America. And I think this movie, unfortunately, gets away from that, which is like a betrayal of the comics. But Anthony Mackie doesn't get away from that. He makes you realize that in every frame that he deserves to be here. That that this is not some kind of thing where like Disney's trying to appeal to shareholders, or you know, or Disney's trying to dilute the importance of him being the first black Captain America. Like, he shows that he cares about that, and he plays it straight. He plays it as like, this is something that's important to me. This role of mine, I'm going to take it on as seriously as I possibly can, like as in Sam Wilson's perspective. And he allows that importance to be met by Harrison Ford's rage, and you just kind of see that clashing between the two of them of, you know, this is what I feel like I am, you know, being called to do, versus this is what I feel you should be doing for your country. And I think both of them do a really good job at being able to communicate that to the audience, that like these are both redemptive people. There are, like, at least Harrison Ford's Thunderbolt Ross is a redemptive character because he, you know, puts a lot of heart into what he believes, and that he believes he's doing it for the right reasons. Whereas Anthony Mackie, like, his Captain America can be very, I think at times he can, you know, take the law into his own hands, as, you know, Chris Evans' Captain America did. So it's like, not like he's operating on the basis of like just America as his guide. It's more like operating off of what is the moral good out of this, what is like the net positive that we can bring to the situation, and that not necessarily doesn't always align with American interests, or like governmental interests. And they show that really well, where like the clashing between both, you know, Ford and Mackie is pretty palpable, and every time that they act in the scene together, it's you know, pretty like hypnotic watching Harrison Ford like spar with him. You know, he's the one that's a little bit more of a loose chain, and Anthony Mackie really like just plays that straight man to it perfectly. But then also you got this teamwork from the supporting cast that, you know, Carl Lumbly is such a national treasure. He's an amazing actor, incredible chemistry with Anthony Mackie, and then Danny Ramirez is also pretty fantastic. He brings a lot of just quirky humor, and he's got very good timing. But I do feel like the treatment of the Sabra character, it's clear that, you know, she was supposed to be like some kind of Mossad villain, right? Like, I think that they drastically cut her out of the movie, given the Israel-Gaza conflict right now, given, you know, just the commentary currently about like the genocide in Gaza. It's absolutely awful, and I think it would be a bad look for Marvel to go down that route of being like, hey, like, hey, this is who the bad guy is. Like, I feel like it would be very inappropriate for them to weigh in on any global matters like that. So I think them cutting it out was a really good idea, but they didn't replace her with anything all that interesting. I don't think Shira Haas had much to do, and I think that at the end of the day, it's kind of a nothing character. They could have cut her from the movie and really nothing would have mattered, and they basically did. But then you have, I think, what's her name? She was like the right hand woman for President Ross. She was just so, I hate to say this, but she was so bad. I forget the actress's name, but she was just, it's not her fault. They didn't give her anything to work with. So she would just be like, Mr. President, what's going on? Are you okay? And she would just walk in and have like the most dead eyes in her scenes. And it was like, I don't think she's a bad actress, but they just gave her like no meat to work with as like in like a supervisory role. And you could clearly see in like previous versions of this movie that she had like more of a connection with Sam, and that they had a history, and there's just nothing to really go off of there. So I don't know, it makes all of it feel like scattershot. Like Giancarlo Esposito, for instance, he's a fantastic actor, one of the best villain actors of like our time, and it's truly like it's truly puzzling that they got him to come in here for like 20 minutes, and he's just an exposition machine. And he really, like, if you cut him out of the movie, really nothing changes. I mean, like, some integral feeders of plot points happen because of him, but I don't know, like, I wanted to see more of him. I hope we get to see more of him later down the line, but I just found myself bored with a lot of his scenes, even though his action that he's in is very, like, high octane, and he's pretty unpredictable, so I liked that. Tim Blake Nelson didn't like the design of the leader, to be honest. I think he needed, like, a more enlarged head, more comic book accurate. I think the original design that they did was pretty cool, with him with the mustache and, like, the big head. But this, I mean, I guess it fits more into the grounded tone, but again, I'm like, if you're gonna merge camp and, sinister overtones, like, you gotta be, you gotta do it for a movie that actually, like, hits on those themes well. And I just feel like, because it's congruous, I don't know, his character to me was acted well, but was given nothing that was substantially interesting. So yeah, it's just that they kind of contrive you to feel for Ross by, like, just telling you everything that the leader does. And to me, again, like, I think that's a little insulting to your audience. You gotta respect your audience enough that they're going to arrive at the conclusion on who is the person in the right or in the wrong, or if there even is a person in the right or wrong. And I think Marvel used to do a much better job at that. And this is very much like, hey, so this guy did this and then did that, and now Harrison Ford is bad, but he's not actually bad. He's good. And we showed you pictures of Liv Tyler so many times because you forgot that she was Incredible Hulk in 2008. So, this is basically an Incredible Hulk sequel. So, like, we want you to remember that, like, this guy was actually, a good guy once. You've just never seen it on screen before. And I don't know. I just feel like that is a non-starter as a plot point. Like, you can, I think, allow your audience to get there by, like, him taking actions that are more in line with, maybe the person that Liv Tyler's character knew him to be when she was younger. That means spending more time with Liv Tyler. That also means paying Liv Tyler more money, which I'm sure they didn't want to do. And, it's very contrived. It's contrived in trying to make you, like, feel empathy for characters that, like, really, in any other context, you would not feel empathy for. And if he wasn't played by Harrison Ford, you wouldn't feel anything for him, because, Harrison Ford injects a lot of his own, like, personal brand of getting you to feel for his issues, and getting him to feel for, like, or getting you to feel for his anguish, especially as an older man, like him reckoning with his regrets. Harrison Ford just does that so well, and I don't think if you had another actor in that role that they'd be able to make you empathize. But it's just kind of like the script works overtime to do that too, and that coupled with his performance, it just kind of is overwhelming. And it makes me think, like, what was the purpose of this movie? Like, he says, we're building the Avengers again. We're trying to figure out, like, what the Avengers look like in this modern age, and I don't know, like, I don't feel like it made a point at the end of, like, who Captain America is, like, what it means to be Captain America in this America. They didn't ask that question, nor did they, like, approach an answer for that. I think they nailed down personally what it means for Sam to be a hero, maybe not necessarily Captain America, but be a hero that's following in Steve's footsteps. That was interesting, and I think the scene with Bucky was one of the strongest scenes in the movie, where they talk about how he's strong because he didn't take the serum, and that's what allows him to have his moral compass, is that he didn't allow something that's bigger than him to define him. And in essence, I think the movie found its point, but didn't even try to, like, expand upon it. It kind of just jammed it towards the end, and then it became like a thing in the third act, where Sam, says, "Oh, Bucky's just full of shit. I should have taken the serum." And it's a funny moment, but it's like, this would pay off so much better if that was the theme from the beginning of the movie. But so much of it is revolving around this idea of, well, I want to recreate the Avengers, and that kind of it's brought up first, and then you don't touch it. You don't touch Sam as Captain America. It's more like, oh, this government is unwilling to work with us, and we got to go out on our own. And it's so cluttered with so many different ideas that it has no idea really what to precisely focus on, until it's too late, until you have a movie that's kind of all about optics, and all about like trying to appeal to the biggest, widest base, but in the end, because it doesn't decide on anything, it can't appeal to any of them. Because like, think about it, they keep on talking about this celestial treaty, and I can't tell you how many times I counted it, maybe 7 times, that Harrison Ford mentions how important this treaty is. I'm like, what's in the treaty? Why is it important? Why does this matter to a post-blip world? Like, what is the metal gonna do? I think they explain it early on, but like, show that. Show how the metal has affected others. Make that be a launching point for particular X-Men characters. Like, I don't understand why we did not segue adamantium into some kind of world building here, and ditch this grounded political tone for something that's a little bit more heightened, that fits in with something like a CGI Red Hulk, and just have a little fun with recognizing that you're in the universe. Bring some Avengers into this. I mean, Captain America movies aren't exempt from bringing Avengers into their movies. So like, if you're gonna mention them, I feel like you gotta pay that off somehow, and they don't, because the post-credit scene in this movie is absolutely awful, and one of the worst post-credit scenes that we've ever gotten. You might as well not have gotten one. It's about, I think Sam visits the leader in the raft, and Sam essentially is told by the leader that he's seen all these probabilities, and that there's multiple heroes. You got to protect yourself from the others. And it's just, it felt like, insert TBD threat here. Like, there's I know they're mentioning the multiverse, but we all already knew this as viewers. And if this is Sam's first time finding out, he should be shown what that means. He should be shown what the multiverse looks like. He should be in contact with a Doctor Strange. He should have run across somebody that maybe has seen some kind of multiversal thing before. Maybe Spider-Man. Show. Maybe Sony can't. I guess Sony wouldn't be the right people to do that. But then maybe there's a way you could shoehorn Thor into that, or you shoehorn Ms. Marvel into that. There's so many other things that could have happened that would show off the multiverse. Monica Rambeau, like, there's so many ways that they could have like cut into that and have Sam see it for the first time. But to be told about the multiverse for the first time by a villain that we have only seen in this movie and briefly spent time with in a phase 1 movie that most people dislike, I think that's a very poor decision on Nate Moore and Kevin Feige's part. And I think part of it is just like, they want to get over with this as fast as possible. So I think this will lay some foundation for them building the Avengers back up. Avengers Doomsday is going to happen next year, but like, I don't know. It's weird that we have not gotten an Avengers movie since Endgame, and we get a new one next year, and we don't even know what the lineup is. And there's no world building to get us there. So they were going to have to do some heavy lifting on Thunderbolts and on Fantastic Four. And I don't see the Disney Plus series being able to do that either. So we need one more movie that ties a lot of this together and makes it work from a storytelling perspective. And I think that's going to be Black Panther next year, probably February of next year. They haven't announced it yet, but I think that's where we're heading. Because I know Denzel Washington has announced he's going to be in it. And Ryan Coogler is coming back to direct. Maybe that's what's coming next. Maybe we're getting a Midnight Suns movie. Whatever it is, Marvel needs to do a better job at world building. Even if the movie is good, because, I mean, all in all, Captain America Brave New World, it's an often misguided, misaligned political thriller that's disguised as this uplifting, campy action film. And it struggles to take off, but when it soars, it shows how much we deserve an amazing Cap like Anthony Mackie. And I don't know, I think Marvel needs to do better by their actors that have put in so much work to earn this spot. Because while this could have been a disaster if certain things didn't offset the poorly cobbled together script, we we could give Marvel credit for salvage something that clearly wasn't working for a while, but we should expect better when these characters have been presented in a much better, more focused fashion. In the recent past, I can't believe that we got such a terrible post credit scene. A lot of people in my theater were just like, "What? Like, we waited for that?" But I mean, I'll digress. They can't make too many promises right now. I guess they could have reshot this. Out of all the reshoots, you don't reshoot the post credit scene. It's stupid. But when Marvel was figuring out all their crap last year, they were making a lot of promises on those post credit scenes from previous years ago, and then last year they were clearly trying to figure out how does this work moving forward. So we'll see how that pans out. I mean, I'm very excited for Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four for Steps, Daredevil Born Again. That little Spider-Man show that they got right now on Disney Plus is it's fun. It's good. I think they're getting more into a creative bag. I'm worried about Avengers Doomsday. I think it has the potential to be like very mediocre if Fantastic Four does not come through in the way that everybody wants it to. I think it's going to be hard getting to see Fantastic Four and Thunderbolts in that new Avengers movie as our new Avengers. It's going to be a little jarring. But, I mean, I think Marvel's on the upswing still. Agatha all along was fantastic, and Deadpool and Wolverine was just like a total blast, even though it's not great MCU. It's like pretty good MCU, but we'll see where we're at by the summer and getting this multiverse saga in its right place. I hope it's in its right place. But until then, we got a lot to get through in the MCU. We got this new Daredevil show coming up. I think Eyes of Wakanda is happening. Wonder Man. I think that the fall they're doing Marvel Zombies as well. So like, let the animation have a little fun. The MCU needs to remember to have fun. I think we lost that by the time we hit the Marvels. It was just like getting exhausting. But yeah, I'll I'll talk to you guys when that happens. I'll see if I do a podcast on Thunderbolts. I think that's gonna be really good. I like the gritty nature of that. I think it actually is something that requires a gritty nature that Captain America: Brave New World didn't necessarily need. I think if they had just like fed off of the right themes, like Falcon and the Winter Soldier did, then this would have been a lot more of an enjoyable, like, unified movie experience. But instead, it just comes together as like really slapped together, slapdash and sloppy, and just. I definitely think the Falcon and the Winter Soldier is a better piece of MCU media by a hefty margin. I think we don't give that show enough credit for better visuals, better visual style, and better action. Overall, better acting. I think too. They gave Anthony Mackie a lot more to do in that series, and I think he does the best with what he has here. I think it's overall a good movie, and I'm disappointed that it could have been so much better because you see where they could have shifted away from this kind of like everything's fine, everything's good, hunky dory kind of America story, and they could have shifted out of this whole icy, very like tense tone and atmosphere that is good. Admittedly, it's good for the short term, but for the long term, it just makes the whole thing feel messy. But that's Captain America: Brave New World. Go see it if if you can, on streaming when it comes out on Disney Plus. I don't think this is one that you should go see in theaters if you're not all that into it. If you like Anthony Mackie as Captain America and you want to have an enjoyable, like, February movie to go see, this will be the one. I think this movie makes probably like 500, 600 million. It will be a success for sure. People want to see Harrison Ford as Red Hulk too, and I think that's something that's going to get a lot of people in seats. I mean, our theater was packed, so I think he just made like close to 200 million, which is lower than Quantumania and Black Panther, but still, like, it'll do well. It'll have some legs to it because even though the word of mouth won't be great on the critics side, like trying to talk to people about Rotten Tomatoes and stuff like that, I think fans are a lot more positive than critics on this, and they'll tell people like, "Oh yeah, you should go see it. It's fun." And at the end of the day, that's what these movies should be. So I guess we can give it that. But before I go, some recommendations. So we are watching Severance right now. Just finished season 1, heading into season 2. It's unbelievable. Highly recommend. Ben Stiller at the top of his craft. I just finished Shogun as well. I've been watching it a lot all last year, and I finally finished it. It is truly like astounding, epic, big scale television. So if you haven't watched that, highly recommend that. And yeah, like I said, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man and Invincible are on right now. I think both of them have very similar vibes. Invincible season 3, of course, is like much better, but it's good to see comic book animation in such a good place, and I hope that continues. X-Men 97 really renewed a lot of interest in that on the Marvel side, and then Invincible is Invincible. It's always been great. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, my viewing habits and everything. But we got our Gossip Girl podcast coming up soon. Very excited about that. My wife and I have been itching to do that. I think I posted something on the Substack on Christmas, and I said it's going to be out the next week, and it is mid to late February right now. So as you can see, we have had a quite busy start to our year, but we will finally get that out there, and our Petiti Picks episode of The Wire is on its way too. So keep your eyes out for that. We're very excited to finally just get back on the mic and discuss these awesome shows, these very different shows. But until then, this is John Dudley Speaks. I'm your host, yours truly, John Dudley. Thanks for tuning in.